The event was held from the 19th of May to the 8th of June, 1959, a round-robin event. And as you can see there, Bobby Fischer was in a close third place behind Michael Tal with 11.5 points and Svetozar Gligoric with 11. Bobby and Palkeres tying for the third position with 10.5 points each. Now the Great Dane, Grandmaster Bent Larsen. And if you don't know that name, where have you been? Bent Larsen was born March 4th, 1935. He passed away September 9th, 2010 at the age of 75. His full name is Jørgen Bent Larsen, and he became an international master at 19 and a grandmaster at age 21. Six-time Danish champion, and he is one of only 3 players that have won 3 interzonals, the other 2 being world champion Vasily Smyslov and world champion Michael Tal. In this game, after e4, Bent Larsen deploys the Caro-Kann defense, c6. Knight f3, d5. Bobby with the 2 knights attack plays knight to c3. Bishop g4 is Mindeno's variation, and that's named for Siegfried Bernhard von Mindeno, who was born in Berlin, March 26, 1905. He passed away April 2nd, 1967. He was born in Germany, but eventually lived in the Netherlands. Mindeno was. Bishop g4 is Mindeno's variation. h3 puts the question to the bishop, and that question is answered, in this case, with the exchange line, bishop takes knight. Queen takes the bishop, knight f6, pawn d3 opens the door for the queen's bishop, e6, pawn a3 precludes bishop to b4, so he plays bishop to c5. Now that's not the book move. The book move is to play queen's knight to d7, and that's answered by g3, and the most common line is then bishop c5, bishop to g2, and both sides castle. In this game, Bent Larsen playing bishop c5 right away. Bishop e2, castles, castles. Now queen's knight comes to d7. Queen g3, lining up with the king, threatening bishop h6. Bishop d4, and sure enough, bishop h6 is played, threatening checkmate. So only defense knight to e8, and Bobby then withdraws his bishop and hits the queen. Now the bot indicating bishop d2. I kind of rather would play bishop to f4. Let's see what I get for that. A more active diagonal, in my opinion, and I get a star. Bishop g5 from Bobby Fischer, and the queen's knight now transfers to the king's knight position, knight df6. Why move into a pin? So queen b6, hit this b-man, strongly recommended by the bot. Queen's knight to f6 is the move chosen from the Great Dane. And now bishop f3. No doubt he does want to play to e2 with his knight, and that's why he vacated that square. He's not worried about bishop takes pawn because rook b1 skewers the bishop and black's b-man. Queen d6 here, bishop f4, queen c5. e5 does feel stronger, doesn't it? e5 hits that bishop. He's going to be pretty much compelled to go back to g5. And after pawn takes pawn and pawn takes pawn, you could probably play queen e6 here, among other things. Maybe trade off and double white's pawns. There are a number of moves that could be played. Let's see. Queen e6. Let's see what it thinks about bishop takes. And it's stuck. It likes that move as well. All right, let's come back. Queen c5 from Bent Larsen. Queen's rook to b1. I thought e5 would be more appropriate here. The bot calling for knight takes d5. Wow. We'll look at the bot's move in a moment. I did not consider knight takes d5, but the point is that this bishop would be trapped, isn't it? That's really clever. Knight takes d5. Says, I'm going to trap your bishop. I did not see that at first. I was thinking e5. I get a star. e5 is fine. And now, I was actually thinking here, hit that bishop. And if bishop takes the pawn, well, actually, I have to play the rook to a2. So maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree. But let's come back to knight takes d5. This was really clever here. And on pawn takes knight, c3, and the bishop is trapped, isn't he? Wow. Really delicious move by the bot there. Finally, a move that I can admire and understand, which is very important. Yeah, I guess you're right. It does trap the bishop, but I'm a little bit hesitant. Come back to this. He says this traps the bishop, or does it? Bishop c3. I am getting an open file. It's hard to know. The bot says it's dead equal. The eval bar does. Let's go back. Bobby, not wanting to mess with it, goes ahead and plays rook a b1. Doesn't have to worry about it. So d takes e4, d takes e4, now e5. Right, knight h5. What an interesting move that is. Please take my knight, says the bot. Now that is fantastic. Oh, I see. The queen covers. My bad. All right, so yeah. You want to give up the bishop pair? I'm okay with that, says the bot. And apparently it's the right move for white. Coming back, e5 was played by Bent Larsen, hitting the bishop. Bishop to g5. Bishop takes the knight right there. Pawn takes the bishop. And here, pawn to b5 was played. That's remarkable. Not like the bot calling for b6 instead. My choice was just queen e7 here, and that keeps an eye on e5 while adding support to this knight. What did I get for queen e7? A thumbs up. b5 from Bent Larsen. c4, now a6, and bishop to d2, looking to skewer the queen and the rook. I also had my eyes on occupying this open file with my other rook. I'm given an inaccuracy. Oh, it changed it to a thumbs up. Bishop d2 was Fischer's choice, and queen e7. Bishop b4, knight d6. Now king's rook to d1, and that's given an exclam. King's rook to d8. Defends. C takes b5. Not liked. The bot wanting you to double your rooks, right? Play rook here, and then slide it on over. The lift and slide. That's what I call it anyway. C takes b5 is played. C takes b5 is interesting. I would have preferred a takes b5, capturing toward the center, but that does get a star. Why am I not capturing toward the center, pray tell? I get a check mark, maybe because this is already defended and the c-man is not. C takes b5, or maybe because you can more easily attack here, perhaps. I don't know. Rook d3 is played. Now queen e6. Now the rooks are doubled on the d file. Rook b d1. Knight b7 says, let's just trade everything and go to a draw. Bishop c3 super attacks the e-man. Really, bishop g5 hitting the queen preferred. It's a good move. Queen g5, interesting. Bishop d2 here is interesting. Coming back to h6, perhaps. I get a star for bishop d2. This is an interesting move to me. I get a star for that. All right. Anyway, but not bishop c3, apparently. Rook takes the rook. Held in great disdain. Double your rook on your queen and add support to the e-man, says the annotator. You've got that super attack. You can battery defend it, says the annotator. Tie up your two major pieces defending a pawn, says the annotator. Okay, well, rook takes rook it was, and not rook takes rook here. Pawn takes the rook. Reuniting some pawns. That was really shrewd and subtle. He says, I had two isolated pawns, now I only have one. Now it is a backward pawn, and it's on an open file, but at least it's no longer isolated, says Bobby Fischer. Rook e8 here now supporting the e-man. King h2, pawn h6. Right, knight c5 says, let me show you what I think about your newly reunited pawn. I'm gonna give you something to think about, Bobby. And can we just trade down to an endgame, though? Probably, right? Takes. And white cannot, oh boy, white cannot play because we're capturing this pawn. We're not gonna grab the bishop here. We're gonna play, bam! Oh yeah! You don't want to take that with this pawn because you're getting hacked here. So you probably have to play here, and then I retreat my knight. It says don't even take it, and don't take that either. Now I've got a super attack there. All right, very interesting. H6 from Bent Larsen, now D4, knight D6, and now rook E1. So don't play pawn takes pawn. That looks good, but it's not as good as it looks. Look how it gets a question mark. And again, same thing, it's just different. I've got tempo, don't I? I take the E-man, hit your queen, and after you take my knight, I replace it with the other knight, and then this is just going to be a simplification. You got to move your queen, and I grab the bishop and trade my knight for your bishop. And then I'm winning this pawn to boot. All right, let's go back. So Bobby rook E1. By the way, if you're wondering, no, taking with the queen is even worse. Oh, even worse. I'm just going to move my queen out of the way. Gonna move my queen out of the way, and it ends up being the same thing. It's just different, ladles and jelly spoons. It's simply the same thing. It's just different. So rook E1, Bobby finding the best move. Knight C4, yeah, take white's pawn before he can take yours, says the bot. Knight C4 it was. It does put the question to the A-man. Bent Larsen looking to make two passed pawns on the outside of the board. Well, now D takes E5 and knight takes E5. Bishop D1 and knight is played to G6. Knight G6 is not the discovered super attack that the bot wanted, but rather knight C4, but it is a discovered super attack in either case. E5 is played, knight D5, bishop B3, pinning the knight to the queen, queen C6, breaking the pin, renewing the question to this bishop, bishop B2, looking for queen F3. That's marked as a mistake. Right idea, wrong square, says the bot. Real line here, apparently. Knight df4 is played. Rook d1 on a5. I'm not sure why that's given a mistake mark either. The idea, obviously, is to play a4, and that looks good to any human being out there. Rook d6 here. Queen e4. Now rook d7. Should probably play d4 here with his rook. Let's see what we get for rook d4. An exclam, ladles and jelly spoons. And after the queen moves, I can come here. I've got some ideas of attacking there. Rook d7 was played. Knight e6. Bishop d5, hitting the queen. So queen e3 is a strange-looking recommendation from the bot. Boy, that would be hard for me to play. How about you guys? Give up the queens and double two pawns on an open file? Wow, that's really strange. Doubled isolated. I'm not sure I could isolate and double my pawns in this position. But the annotator saying that's the best route. You can have that route. Bishop d5, Bobby's choice. Queen e2, bishop c3, pawn b4, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, queen takes pawn. And now we are really getting drawish. Bobby with bishop a5. Bot calling for a queen trade here as well. And rook e7, I would gather. Yes. I don't know, what about just a bishop d2 here? Does that work? Yes. Bishop a5 was his choice. So bishop a5 from Bobby Fischer. Queen takes the queen, king takes the queen, rook e7. This is going to simmer down to a draw, even though it goes another 50 moves. This was a remarkable game. Rook d6, knight ef4, bishop f3, knight e6. This is just back and forth. Bishop b6, knight e5, bishop d5, rook d7, rook takes rook, knight takes rook, hits the bishop, bishop e3. Bobby with the bishop pair just keeps fighting and fighting and fighting. Knight f6, bishop c6, g5, king f3, king g7, bishop a4, knight d5. He's going to make Bent Larsen prove it. Bishop c1, h5, right, knight d4 check. Knight d4 check is answered by king e4. And I can force a trade of one of the pieces. Yeah, I see. Okay. Yep, that would work. That would work. Back, 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 back. H5 was played. Bishop B2 check. King H6. Bot saying interpose. If you're going to move your king, I think stay closer to the center myself. I get a check mark there. I guess he didn't want to be susceptible to another check from the bishop. King H6 was played. Bishop B3. Bot calling for King E4. I thought also maybe start getting your pawns, bolstering your position here. Take some territory. Star keeps the knights from coming to this square, etc. Bishop B3. Knight df4, as if to prove my point. Bishop c2, knight to g6. And the bot calling for knight f8. I don't know why you want to move to the rim. I'd rather play knight c5 if I'm going to move that. Get a thumbs up. Knight g6, king g3. Again, pawn g3 for me, does it? But king g3, knight ef4, bishop e4, knight h4, bishop f6. Interesting. Knight hg6, king f3, knight h4 check, king back to g3. They do a quick little repetition to satisfy the time control. King h2, pawn h4, king g1. Bobby not willing to give up the draw unless forced to do so. Knight h5. Bishop c3, fighting tooth and nail. I've got the bishop pair. I'm going to make you prove that you have the draw. Knight gf4 here, aiming for this check, which is a fork. So king f1 prevents that. Knight g7, bishop f6, knight fh5, bishop to e5, pawn f6, bishop d6, pawn f5, bishop f3, knight f4, king e1, stubborn boy, king g6, king d2, knight ge6, bishop e5, knight c5, king e3. Not much to comment on here. It's just a matter of time as long as Bent Larsen doesn't blow it. Knight ce6, bishop c6, king f7, king f3, king e7, bishop b7, knight g6, bishop c3, knight gf4, bishop a6, knight d5, hits the bishop again, bishop e5, knight f6, bishop d3 hits the pawn, g4 check, king e2, knight d7 hits the bishop, bishop h2, g takes h3, g takes h3, king f6, king e3, knight e5 hits the bishop here, and he's looking to come here with f4. That's check. Bishop e2 gets out of the knight's sights. Knight g6, bishop f1, pawn f4 check, king f3, knight e5 check, king e4, knight g5 check, king takes the f-man, knight ef3, bishop g3. Wow, really? Wow. Bishop g3 was his move. And the point is, takes and takes. He went ahead and accepted the draw here, or offered the draw finally. But the point is, these knights in tandem are going to be busted. So if he plays knight e1, okay, I'll play h4, check. I mean, it's going to be a draw. He can't win with just two knights. That much is certain. He'd be glad to give up both knights for both pawns. You know, I'll give up my knight for one pawn, my other knight for the other, and a bishop is insufficient. Let me give you the numbers here. 95.8 accuracy by Fischer, 95.6 accuracy by Larsen. Both players with a 2800 performance rating. An amazing opening on both sides, an incredible middle game on both sides, and tremendous precision in the endgame on both sides.